My name is Adrian Vacek, and I believe in order. You have to understand that about me before any of this makes sense, because order is not simply a preference for me, it is a fundamental principle of survival. My laboratory is a testament to it. Every pipette is aligned in its rack by volume. Every data point is cataloged in triplicate across encrypted servers. Every cryovial is labeled with a precision that borders on obsession. I am a molecular biologist, you see. I spend my days mapping the very code of life, finding the predictable, beautiful logic in the seeming chaos of existence. It's what I'm good at. It's the only thing that has ever kept me safe. For the last decade, I've been working on the ultimate puzzle, consciousness, the human mind. Not in a philosophical, abstract sense, but in a tangible, biological one. I'm not searching for a soul. I'm tracing the neural pathways, decoding the cascading protein signals that hold our memories, our fears, our very sense of self. My goal has always been simple, if ambitious, to build a fail-safe. A protocol, a molecular reinforcement, a way to make the mind immune to the decay I know is not just possible, but inevitable. I need to prove that the self isn't some fragile ghost in the machine, but a fortress of logic that can be understood, repaired, and ultimately controlled. It's a strange fixation for a man of science, I concede. But my obsession wasn't born in a sterile lab. It was born in a silent, sun-drenched room, watching my father disappear. He was a brilliant man, a theoretical physicist whose mind danced with cosmic theories I could barely comprehend. To me, he was a giant. Then the giant fell. It wasn't sudden, like a stroke. It was a slow, terrifying erosion, like a coastline giving way to the sea. His memories started to fray at the edges. He'd forget my name, then my mother's. His logic unraveled. He would spend hours trying to solve simple equations he had once scribbled on napkins as a party trick. One day, he just stopped. He was physically there, a man of 63 breathing in a chair by the window. But his mind was gone, wiped clean. He'd become a vessel, his eyes tracing the path of dust motes and the sunlight, trapped in a silent, empty space I couldn't reach. That emptiness is my ghost. It's the horror I've dedicated my life to outrunning. While other people feared death or pain or things that go bump in the night, I feared that silent, catatonic nothingness. The complete and total loss of self. My father's fate became the blueprint for my terror, and my work has been a 45-year-long attempt to build a world where that blueprint can be methodically, logically, and permanently burned. I thought I could control it. I believed with every fiber of my being that my intellect could build a wall so high and so reinforced that the silence could never get in. I was wrong. And this is the story of the day I opened the door and let it in myself. It all started with a patent, a complex protein folding problem. A potential key to synaptic reinforcement had me stumped for weeks. It was a knot of impossibly elegant biology that refused to yield to my simulations, its tertiary structure collapsing in every model. Frustrated, I decided to take a more direct approach. For years, I'd been mapping my own neural activity during REM sleep, cross-referencing it with my research into consciousness. My hypothesis was that I could induce and maintain a stable, controllable, lucid dream state, a mental sandbox where I could manipulate complex models with the speed of thought, free from the physical constraints of processors and code. It was arrogant, I know, but the problem was irresistible, and the potential reward, a new patent and a quantum leap forward in my work, was too great to ignore.
My first attempt was a staggering, unqualified success. I lay down on the cot in my private lab, the hum of the servers a familiar lullaby. I affixed the EEG leads to my temples, the cool gel a small, tactile anchor. I followed my own protocol, a sequence of breathing exercises, mnemonic triggers, and targeted frequency modulation from the EEG. The transition was seamless. One moment I was aware of the cool leather of the cot, the next I was standing in a perfect, thought-form replica of my lab. I could feel the precise 20 degrees centigrade chill of the air on my skin. I could smell the faint, clean scent of ozone from the sterilizer. It was flawless. The protein model floated before me, a shimmering cascade of ribbons and helixes, more vivid than any computer simulation. I reached out and pulled it apart, refolded it, tested bond angles with the flick of my wrist. The process was intuitive, instantaneous. I was no longer interpreting data, I was the data. Time dilated. Hours of complex calculations were performed in what felt like minutes. I had complete and absolute control. But as I was finalizing the sequence, a flicker. In the polished chrome reflection of a centrifuge lid, a shadow moved behind me. It was tall and thin, gone before I could properly register its form. I stopped, my focus broken. I turned. The lab was empty. I walked to the centrifuge and ran a spectral analysis on its surface within the dream, searching for a light anomaly. Nothing. I dismissed it. A stray thought, a glitch in the simulation, a piece of mental flotsam. It was an irrelevant variable. I woke up with the completed protein sequence burned into my memory and a sense of absolute intoxicating triumph. My mind was my own to command. The following week was a blur of activity. The sequence held. The patent was filed. My work was lauded. I had, in one night, achieved more than most researchers do in a lifetime. My fortress, I believed, was now unbreachable. Flush with this success, I decided to go back in. This wasn't about a problem to be solved. This was about exploration. It was about testing the limits of my control. I built the lab again from memory, but it felt different. The air was colder, the precise 20 degrees centigrade now holding a morgue-like chill. The familiar, comforting hum of the equipment was absent, leaving a dead, flat silence that seemed to absorb thought. An unnerving stillness had replaced the dynamic potential of the space. I ignored the growing unease, my logical mind attributing it to anticipation, a change in my own baseline emotional state affecting the simulation's parameters. I ran a mental diagnostic on the environment, checking for inconsistencies. Everything was where it should be, down to the last slide on the last tray. Then I saw it. It wasn't a flicker this time. Standing at the far end of the lab, partially obscured by a rack of cryo-storage tanks, was a figure. It was translucent, like a heat haze rising from asphalt, but it had a distinct shape. The stooped shoulders and thin, frail frame of my father in his final years. It didn't move. It just stood there, a silent, shimmering question mark in the heart of my controlled world. My breath caught in my throat. My meticulously constructed reality began to feel thin, fragile, like a projection on a screen that was about to tear. My scientific mind screamed that it was just a symbol, my subconscious dredging up old fears to process the recent breakthrough. It was a logical, acceptable explanation, but it felt like more. It felt like an intrusion. I focused my will, the same will that had effortlessly untangled proteins and tried to delete the apparition. Delete object. It remained. End simulation. Nothing happened. Then it turned its head. It didn't have a face, just a smooth, blurry ovoid of shimmering light, but I felt its gaze on me, and a pure, primal fear I hadn't felt since I was a child, watching my father stare blankly past me, shot through my veins. A cold cascade of adrenaline dumped into my system. I jolted awake, my heart hammering against my ribs, the image of that faceless, shimmering man seared in my mind. I sat up, panting, the smell of ozone and sterile air from the dream still haunting my senses. I had lost control. For days, I tried to rationalize it. I buried myself in data, analyzing the EEG readouts from the second dream, searching for an anomaly, a neural misfire, a spike in the temporal lobe that could explain the apparition. There was nothing. The data was clean. I told myself it was stress, a manifestation of the pressure I was under. My work has always been my fortress, my logic, the bricks and mortar. To admit that something from within my own mind could defy that logic felt like a betrayal. It felt like the first hairline crack in the foundation of my entire life. But the memory of that silent, watching figure wouldn't fade. The fear was a cold stone in my gut. I had to know. I had to prove I was still in control, that this was a bug in the system that could be isolated and fixed. That was my fatal, arrogant mistake. I convinced myself that one more test, a final, fully documented dive, would allow me to isolate the variable, confront it, and prove it was nothing more than a harmless anomaly. I went in again last night. I didn't even bother to construct the lab. The moment I crossed over, I was in a long, sterile white hallway that wasn't from any memory I owned. It stretched into a vanishing point of perfect geometric infinity in both directions. The silence was absolute, a crushing physical weight that felt like the precursor to deafness. I was already lost. My mental anchor, the image of my lab, was gone. Panic began to bubble up, hot and acidic in my throat. I tried to force the simulation to change, to build my lab around me. But the white walls were implacable. My will had no effect here. I turned, and he was there, not 20 meters away, the translucent figure of my father. This time he wasn't just watching. He began to walk towards me, his movements slow, unnaturally smooth and utterly silent. His feet made no sound on the pristine white floor. I ran. I didn't think. I just turned and fled down that endless corridor, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against the suffocating silence. I didn't dare look back, but I could feel him behind me, a cold presence gaining on me with that same unhurried pace. The white walls of the corridor began to blur, the floor dissolving under my feet into a gray mist. The world was unmaking itself around me. Finally, I risked a glance over my shoulder. The figure was closer now, only a few meters away, close enough for me to see its face clearly through the shimmering haze. But it wasn't a faceless blur anymore, and it wasn't my father's. He was my own face, stretched into a wide, vacant, and utterly malevolent grin. My own eyes, empty of recognition or reason, stared back at me. And as it reached me, its fingers elongated and translucent, the last of the corridor dissolved, plunging me into a featureless, blindingly white void. There is no time in the void. There is no sound, no smell, no up or down. There is only the searing, uniform white and the crushing, absolute silence. And me? At first, my mind, the orderly, logical instrument that I had spent a lifetime sharpening, fought back. It tried to impose structure on the formless. I started counting prime numbers, a methodical, rhythmic recitation against the nothingness. I reached 1,489, then 1,493, then the very concept of numbers began to feel alien. the symbols dissolving into a meaningless hum. I tried to rebuild my lab, brick by mental brick. I visualized every beaker, every centrifuge, every single labeled slide in its refrigerated tray. But the void was a perfect solvent. My creations would hold for a moment, shimmering like a desert mirage, before they were bleached away, reabsorbed into the relentless white. The silence was the worst part. It wasn't just an absence of sound, it was an active, pressing presence. It pushed in on me, suffocating thought, making me yearn for the simple hum of a server. It was the same silence that had filled my father's room, and I knew, with a certainty that transcended logic, that I'd walked into my own self-made catatonia. My sense of self began to fray. Memories, once sharp and clear, became blurred. I fought to hold on to them. I pictured my wife, Eleanor, on our wedding day. I could see the lace on her dress, the pearls of her necklace, but her face was a smooth, hazy oval. I try to recall the complex satisfaction of solving the protein equation. The memory was a hollow echo, the data corrupted beyond recovery. My mind, my fortress, was being dismantled from the inside out. I was becoming my father. A new terror emerged, the horror of forgetting what I was losing. Suddenly, a sound. After an eternity of silence, it was a physical blow, a soft, mocking chuckle that echoed in the non-space around me. I turned, and there he was, the doppelgänger. My face, my body, standing 10 feet away, looking perfectly solid. The malevolent grin was wider now. It held up his hand, and in it was a pen, a simple, crimson-red fountain pen. My mind, what was left of it, screamed. Eleanor had given it to me for my 40th birthday. He raised the pen, its silver nib glinting in the non-light, and walked towards me with that same slow, smooth gait. I didn't run this time. There was nowhere to go. He stopped in front of me, his eyes, my eyes, empty of everything but a terrifying, vacant amusement. Then, with a swift, precise motion, he stabbed the pen deep into my left wrist. There was no pain, just a sudden, shocking cold. From the wound, there was no blood. Red ink, thick and viscous, pulsed out, staining the perfect white of the void. The colors spread like a virus, a blooming stain of crimson that consumed the nothingness. The doppelganger watched, its smile widening as my world bled out. The red washed over me, warm and sticky. My knees buckled. My last coherent thought was not of my wife, or my work, or my life. It was a simple, stark realization. Order is an illusion. I woke with a gasp. The first thing I registered was the gentle weight of a high thread count duvet, the softness of a memory foam pillow beneath my head. My eyes fluttered open to a room bathed in the soft gray light of early morning. Sunlight streamed through a gap in the heavy curtains, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air like microscopic constellations. Beside me, a woman with dark, curling hair was sleeping, her breathing a soft, rhythmic whisper. For a moment, there was nothing, just the quiet, detached observation of a scene without context. Then, a sharp, throbbing ache flared in my left wrist. I lifted my arm from under the covers. There, on the pale skin of my inner wrist, was a wound, a deep, ragged puncture mark, crusted with dried blood that was almost black, surrounded by a faint, reddish stain as if ink had bled into the skin. It was impossible. It was real. I stared at the mark, a single, inexplicable data point. My heart began to pound, a frantic animal rhythm of fear, but the fear was nameless. It was a reaction without a cause. I looked around the room again. The furniture, a polished mahogany placer,
A tall bookcase filled with leather-bound volumes, a framed photograph on the bedside table, was all perfectly arranged, clean and orderly. But it was the order of a stranger's house. I felt no connection to it, no flicker of recognition. I carefully picked up the photograph. It showed a smiling man who looked like me, his arm around the sleeping woman. They were standing on a beach. I felt nothing, no love, no familiarity, just a blank, hollow curiosity. Who was she? Who am I? The question landed in my mind with no weight, no echo. I searched for an answer, for a name, a memory, a single piece of data to anchor myself. I found nothing. It was like looking into a deep, empty well. There was no past, no future, only this single terrifying moment in an unfamiliar room. I swung my legs out of the bed, my movements clumsy, uncoordinated. I stood and walked to the large window, pulling back the heavy curtain. Below, a quiet suburban street slept under the rising sun, a world I did not know. I am a man, I am in a house, there is a wound on my arm. These are the only facts I possess. Everything else is gone, wiped clean. The great terror of my life, the ghost I chased with science and logic, was never about the mind breaking. It was about it being emptied. I had spent my entire life building a fortress to keep the silence out, only to discover that the silence was a part of its very foundation, waiting. I had stared into the void, and in my arrogance I had challenged it to a battle of wills. It did not fight back. It simply opened the door and welcomed me home. I looked at my reflection in the window pane. A man of about 45, with tired eyes and a face I did not recognize, stared back. He looked lost. He looked empty. He looked exactly like I remembered my father in his final years, sitting in that chair, staring at a world he could no longer comprehend. The circle was complete. The fail-safe had failed. The fortress was a tomb, and I, the man who believed in order, was now the ultimate chaos, a vessel without a self, trapped not in a dream, but in the waking reality of a silent, empty space. And the screaming, I realize, has been happening for a long time, but there is no sound. There is only the silence and the white. So much white.
Thank you so much for watching or listening. Like and subscribe for more nightmares. Your support keeps the darkness from consuming this channel, so we can face the next terrifying story together. Don't be left in the dark.